Hello, this is Joe Trahan, welcoming you to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooton Foundation, whose mission is to enlighten the world to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances. As the national leader on this subject, they communicate their educational messages through various methods, including this podcast. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the All Me podcast. I am Brian Parker, the Director of Education for the Foundation, but also your host for today's episode. And it's one that I'm looking forward to because we're going to focus on a topic we haven't spent a lot of time talking about yet, and that's drug testing. Drug testing is a crucial component to the anti-doping process, but a lot of people don't realize the science that goes into drug testing. How does it work? What is the science behind that process? How are samples being analyzed? So in this episode, we're going to bring in our friend Mike Colello. He's the National Sales Manager for Aegis Sciences Corporation. Aegis runs one of the largest drug testing labs in the country for a variety of different clients. So Mike's going to give us some insight into how their lab works and what a typical drug testing program looks like for them. So we will spend a lot of time with Mike talking about his background. What kind of substances is he currently seeing people test positive for? How are they staying on top of a lot of the new substances that are being created and get them into their drug panels? And then we'll finish up talking about the tremendous partnership that Aegis and our foundation share. Mike and Aegis has always ensured that any of their clients also get to hear our message as part of their program. And we are truly grateful for their support over the years. So without any further ado, let's bring Mike into the show and talk all about drug testing. Hey, Mike, thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Brian. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you and the Taylor Hooton Foundation.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you for a few different reasons. I mean, number one, we've known each other for a while. Our organizations have been partners for a while, and we'll get into some of the work that we do together. But I'm also excited because we get to tackle a topic that I think is really important in the field of anti-doping that we just haven't really touched on yet, and that's drug testing. We've talked a lot about different substances that are out there and what's being taken, but I think an important angle that I want to tackle with you is testing and how's that process work and what all goes into that. So that's what we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about today. Before I get there, though, anytime I do a podcast, I always like to learn a little bit more about the guests themselves. So before we kind of dive into Aegis and what all you guys do, how about you give us a little bit of background, just some simple stuff. You know, where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? And then kind of what was your career path leading up to what you do at Aegis today?
Well, thank you. I'm happy to share this limited story with you. I grew up in Middletown, New York, which is about 40 miles west of West Point. Which is, as you know, one of the prettiest campuses and most historic campuses in the country. Went to school at a couple of institutions. I graduated from UNLV with a Bachelor of Science in Athletic Training and finished my master's at Syracuse. So, as you can tell, I've been all over the country, and I think it's a good thing because it gives you a different perspective of what there's no one way to do things, so or one philosophy. So it helped, I think, shape not only my career but certainly my philosophy in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice to go New York to Las Vegas. Yeah, I think it's impressive anybody that can graduate from UNLV. I know I would struggle with that. But then going back home to New York, I'm sure you got to see a couple different angles. And then I know from there, after master's, you kind of got into the field of athletic training, right? Was that the next step in your career before doing what you do now?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, that's what I trained to do in both undergrad and graduate school. Fortunate enough to I think anytime you start out, you want to start out at the lower level. This way you can appreciate things appreciate them more when you get to a higher level, and that's what everyone works for. So I started at a junior college and spent a couple of years there. Was fortunate enough to get a job at USC in Los Angeles. Spent 7 years there. One then at UCLA, so I got exposed to the highest level collegiately, And then I was fortunate enough to be asked to join the New York Giants as an assistant athletic trainer. From there, I spent 11 years in the NFL, 7 with as the head athletic trainer for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, that's quite a path, and props to you for staying in it and starting in it and just keep growing it up. So I am most curious. I mean, you've been a lot of different places, but I think anybody would be curious to kind of learn what was it like as an athletic trainer in the NFL, specifically, as you said, the head athletic trainer for the Cleveland Browns. What was that position like? How'd you kind of like that? And then what do you remember most from your time there? There's probably a lot of things that you could get into, but what kind of sticks in your mind from that time working in the league?
Yeah, I think, being a clinician as well as an administrator was most challenging because you're pulled in so many different directions. But what it really boils down to is how you treat people and the relationships you build, and not only with the players, but they're also their families, because you're the medical liaison, and with the administrators, from the ownership down to the security person. And I always thought that if you treat people like you treat your family, then it benefited everyone, and I think everyone appreciated that type of treatment. So it really is, I think the best thing I can tell you, and I think my other peers still in the league would tell you, that it's really the relationships that you make and you build and the trust you gain, and that's the most important aspect of the job, really.
Yeah, I could make an argument that's just an important aspect of life, is the relationship and the people you meet along the way. That's probably what sticks with you more than specific experiences. And I'm sure you still stay in touch with people that you worked with, not just in Cleveland, but throughout the way. And another thing you kind of noted about that, I think is important for anybody to know, is the life and skills that it takes to be an athletic trainer. I mean, there's so much that goes into it. I think there are sometimes misconceptions about, oh, well, you just rehab injury, you're there for games and practice if they need you, but it's not that at all. That the hours and time and effort that it takes to go into that career, takes a lot of work. And I think that's important for people to know, especially if you're outside of that field. And knowing the amount of work that goes into it, I'm curious if that was kind of the reason that transitioned you into what you do now, right? So you left the NFL, began working with Aegis. Was there something that kind of sparked that transition? Was there a reason you wanted to get out of that? And then how did that kind of prepare you for what you're doing now?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was, you're on call 24/7. So the opportunity to spend more quality time as my children grew and was available. And so I took it. Yeah, it just made sense. Aegis and the former owner and founder, Dr. David Black, was very generous, and that's what was really appealing. Again, building relationships, and he had built his laboratory into his successful business, and the footprint was already here. So I currently manage the sports division. They had relationships with probably about 40 institutions across the country. And so it wasn't very hard to just fit right in. The sports division was already implemented. And so it was very easy transition, and he made it that way.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame you for wanting a change of schedule a little bit. I've told this story before I worked with the foundation. I worked in baseball as well, and I know the time and hours that goes into that, and so wanting a shift in that, I think, is a natural thing at some point, and I do think it prepared you well for what you're doing now. And so I want to use that and kind of transition into what you're doing now at Aegis. And so before we get into your position specifically, tell our listeners a little bit more about what Aegis Sciences Corporation does as a whole. I know I've kind of simplified and said that term drug testing, but it's, obviously a lot more that goes into that. So how would you kind of sum up what Aegis does and the services that you guys provide?
Sure. Well, Aegis is a federally certified forensic laboratory, and we provide drug testing services in several areas: the healthcare, sports division, the pharmacogenetics or PGX testing, which is DNA testing. So we have, I believe, right around 4,000 clients total. And we service them all in there's subdivisions of each division, and it's a really neat experience, neat organization that's still growing since the pandemic began in last March. We've transformed ourselves into a certified COVID testing laboratory, so that is added to our expertise. The laboratory is here in Nashville, and it's still growing. So it really is a neat organization.
Yeah, you guys do a lot, and I'll put for those listening, I'll put the link to your website in the show notes so people can kind of go on and check out what all you guys do, because I know there's so much that goes into it. And like you said, you guys continue to evolve as the world evolves. That's the natural order of things. So that's a good background to work off of. So let's take that into your position specifically. So, I've told our listeners you're the national sales manager there at Aegis, but what does that mean? What does your position entail? I mean, if I'm Mike going into work for the day, what does that day look like? And what's an average day for you?
Well, it means my territory is the whole country. So early in the morning, I either speak with clients on the East Coast because they're an hour ahead of me. Midday, talk to or email clients in the central time zone, and then later on in the day, touch base with our clients and institutions out on the West Coast. So it's a full day for sure. And then you incorporate the Zoom meetings that I'm sure everyone is sick of, and the day goes by.
Yeah, you're talking with everybody in a variety of different places and ways about the drug testing program that you guys provide, and that's really what I want to spend a bit of time talking about, is what all goes into a drug testing program, right? So there's a variety of people that you guys work with to do that, but how does that program work? And that's a really big question to ask, because there's a lot that goes into it. But let's say I'm a university. I sign up for a drug testing program with you. What am I getting? Am I getting a completely random just drug testing service? You just show up and randomly pull things at different times of the year. I mean, what all are you testing for? What's the process like to getting samples and sending them off and all of that kind of stuff that goes into it? Can you kind of sum that up for us?
Well, you're getting a full service laboratory. The important thing is to find, again, and we go back to relationships, finding the right people, because it all starts with on-site collections. And the majority of appeals that are won are due from or can be correlated with on-site collections. I mean, when you have human involvement, the likelihood of a mistake is there, although it is rare. We try to minimize it, but so you want to find the right experienced collection group to come on site to your campus and perform the forensically accepted type of collection, how it's processed and how it's secured, so it can arrive at the lab with the appropriate chain of custody, and that's a legal document. And so when the sample and the group is selected, the sample is secured and sent to the lab, it's really, the lab is pretty much automated for the most part. We have many sophisticated and sensitive technologies that we work with. Every sample has the potential to be tested twice. There's a screening process, and then if there is something found that shouldn't be in a biological specimen, it is sent on to confirmation testing, to determine what drug and how much of that drug is in that specimen. And with that, there's some very, again, the eloquent technology that we use, everything from mass spectrometry, gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, to liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry. We use a time of flight. For performance enhancing or steroids, we use a technology, IRMS, isotope ratio mass spectrometry, which can determine if the testosterone level that we found is natural, or that person, or is it synthetic? So we have many tools in our toolbox to determine if it actually is a positive result, and many very good scientists that review these results and then provide those results to the client. So the biggest advantage that our clients enjoy is that if there is a question about a result, they can pick up the phone and talk to one of our scientists right now and get their interpretation of the result and get an answer. And many labs, you really can't do that.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. I'll put notes for a few of those terms that you mentioned in regards to, how you guys are analyzing the samples. I have a couple follow-up questions to that. Number one, how often are you doing the drug testing at these schools that you sign up with? And then number two, on a typical panel that you're testing, what all are you testing for? Does that depend on what panel the school signs up for? Is there X number of banned substances you're looking for? Are you looking for masking agents? Or is every time you do a test, is it a different panel? Just depends on, what the client has kind of put together for you guys.
Right, and we have several panels, including illicit drugs only, and then performance enhancing drugs only, and then sometimes they can combine. It's really up to the institution. There's a lot of variables for each client, but I think the most consistent variable is cost and what they can afford, and that really determines how many tests are scheduled and conducted. We review policies for our institutions on an annual basis for some, but the ones that I have reviewed, they're each individualized drug testing policies. We have some that mandate that every student athlete will have at least one drug test in the academic year. And then there's some that are a little more flexible and have provide options for the amount of drug testing that takes place. So it's really, it varies from institution to institution.
That makes total sense. Just depends on what each group is looking for and how thorough they want to get. I'm kind of curious now that we're talking about this, and I'm not asking you to throw any school or names under the bus by any means, but let's just take like a performance enhancing drug panel, for example, that you kind of run through your process. Are there common substances that you see individuals testing positive for the most, whether that be an elevated testosterone level or a masking agent? I mean, is there something that you guys see happen more often than others by chance?
Sure. I think right now, the majority of our positive performance enhancing reports have SARMs, or the selective modulators, androgen receptive modulators, as probably the most prevalent.
Yeah.
And most of them come from supplement use, but we still see nandrolone positives, and then the synthetic testosterone is out there as well. And again, more times it's from supplement use.
Yeah, that makes sense. We get more and more questions about SARMs every day. So that answer doesn't surprise me. And if you actually want to learn more about SARMs, we have a podcast that we've already recorded. It's already been released that really dives into SARMs and still some of the issues with that and how there's, there really hasn't been any long-term testing with a lot of those substances. There's a lot of unknowns and some common dangers already associated with them, so that you guys can go back and listen to that. But I'm sure that's popping up more and more as people kind of view that as a quote unquote safe alternative to some other things like testosterone. And I know that will continue to evolve. And that actually leads me right into my next question, right? It's the people that are out there that are always trying to stay 2 steps ahead of the testing process, right? Always trying to come up with something that's not on a panel that they can't find in a test, right? So from your perspective, how do you keep an eye on what all is out there, what all is being made? And do you think that there's athletes out there that are taking stuff that are not on one of your panels, right? And requiring you guys to kind of consistently update that along the way?
Oh, absolutely. Again, if someone has resources, they can absolutely beat a drug test, given the time and the resources. Our research and development team does a fabulous job of identifying new substances that are out there. And sometimes there are substances that get recycled. We found steroids that were used in the 1960s from Eastern Bloc countries in a specimen. And really, I think the identifying new synthetic drugs that are being formulated all the time, and how far you can go down and dig down into the specimen. Right now, we are testing at parts per, I believe we're testing at parts per billion. In some WADA laboratories, they're at parts per trillion. So now, there's always a debate, is parts per trillion, how physiologic is that? I'm not sure, but to identify some of these synthetic substances and drugs, you need to have a very sensitive test. And so again, we're getting so many requests for different types of drugs, or our research and development team does just a terrific job in identifying and creating methods to test for those drugs. 5 years ago, we didn't have SARMs, and now we have a very robust panel for them.
Yeah, I imagine your research team stays pretty busy. I've watched enough documentaries and underground labs where they're always trying to come up with various substances that aren't on panels, and that's one of the issues with drug testing on its own without some level of education is, if there's people that are always going to try to work around it, right? It remains a really good deterrent in place for, a lot of the existing stuff. But I know that that's an issue. And so I was kind of curious how you guys kept your eye on that. So that's good to know. I guess talking about some of the substances that you see get tested positive for, and we've talked about SARMs and a lot of that coming out of dietary supplements. I want to ask you about dietary supplements because, due to some of the lack of regulation issues that we see in the industry, we do run into a lot of spiked and contaminated products that can be sold and out there on the markets. And so we have young people that are taking things that may contain things like SARMs or steroids that they aren't even fully aware of. So because of this, I know you guys have created a tool that's called the Aegis Shield, and that kind of helps people avoid this situation to some extent. Can you tell me a little bit more about the Shield and what that tool is and what it does?
No, I'm happy to. Aegis Shield has been a 10-year project at Aegis that was really in response to our clients' questions and concerns about supplements and the supplements their athletes were taking. So we developed a database essentially with a phone app that the user could scan a product, the barcode of a product, and get instant information before purchasing that product. our scientists is a two-tiered review of the label, and it filters out all the aliases that manufacturers use on their label, because in some of the ingredients, you would need a degree in chemistry to decipher what's in that product.
Yeah.
So this takes that and makes it real simple for the user. And it really is an educational resource that wasn't available to student athletes or professional athletes, for that matter, a number of years ago. But since there is no regulation, and again, the resource that it provides benefits each student athlete. They again, some manufacturers intentionally put things in them, and some are cross-contaminated with banned substances. So this helps decipher all the product information that can be confusing.
Yeah, I think it's a really important tool. And we've done several other podcasts about the regulation that's in place in supplements industry and some of the issues there. But, I think you broke it down really well. A lot of people, when they purchase supplements, they could turn that label around and maybe not even tell you what half the ingredients are. And sometimes that's myself included. I mean, we do our presentations and we kind of show people that, if you just take the word testosterone alone, it has about a couple hundred aliases, right? That you wouldn't even know are testosterone. So one of those could be literally just listed on the label. You don't know that you're ingesting some type of synthetic testosterone product, right? So it does an important job of reading those ingredients, knowing what they actually are, and saying, "Hey, look out! There's something in here that could be harmful for you." And I know that's a really cool tool that anybody can use. I'll put a link to that as well. It's an app that anybody could download and use moving forward. It's something I'd recommend to at least be, a little bit smarter and know what you're taking more so than sometimes we do nowadays. So that's a cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a valuable educational resource our clients depend on now.
Yeah. And you said one last word there that I want to kind of wrap up with, and that's education. I know that tools in education, even beyond your drug testing, you guys believe a lot in the power of education. I know we both believe, in the power of drug testing and the importance of that as a deterrent, but I think we also both truly believe in the role that education can play, not only in promoting fair play, but ensuring that health and safety of others. In fact, I alluded at the beginning to our partnership. Any school that signs up for an Aegis drug testing program, you guys have always been so supportive of us that you guys ensure that, our program and our presentation is taken to that school and given to those student athletes in that program. Why is that something you guys wanted to do? Why do you guys also believe that education is so crucial in all of this?
Well, I mean, the more informed an individual is, the better decisions they can make, and that's what in anything. I think to have the information available and not use it is a crime, because if it can help you make better decisions, you're going to be better off, whether it's drugs or even, any part of your daily life. The more educated you are about a subject or about a decision that you're going to make, can shape your life in a good way or in a poor way. So education is key, and it should be part of someone's growth in their whole life. It just helps make good decisions, and we're very fortunate to partner with the Taylor Hooton Foundation. You folks do such a tremendous job of getting the information out there to all types of athletes, whether it's little leaguers or professional athletes. The response that I've seen while attending some of your presentations has just been tremendous. And, thank God for you and Don Sr. for putting in the work that you do. And it's a tremendous honor for us to be a partner of the Taylor Hooton Foundation.
Well, we appreciate those kind words. If it wasn't for groups like you guys, we wouldn't be able to be out there doing this education. So I mean, that means a lot. I've always said this about education. The reason why I think it's so crucial is because it explains why you're getting drug tested, right? Let's say I'm at an NCAA school that is subject to random drug testing. Well, the reason they're subject to that is because this is a health issue, right? It's not about getting you in trouble, right? This is for your own health and safety. And so if you don't, get that education and truly understand what these substances are, why they can hurt you, well, then drug testing just becomes a workaround, something I got to make sure I don't get caught with, right? And then once you're done with your athletic career, whatever it is you're doing, that deterrent of testing goes away. So the two things work really well hand in hand. You guys have always believed in that as well. And our partnership is just, worked perfectly together because we have the same goals at the end of the day. That's what we're trying to do. So we appreciate everything you guys have done to help support us and applaud all the great work you guys do as well. That kind of wraps up my main questions that I had for you. So I don't know, Mike, if you've listened to too many of our podcasts, but at the very end of these things, we always ask a couple curveball questions. That's our cheesy sports name for this stuff. But I want to ask you just a couple fun questions that have nothing to do with drug testing. Just kind of learn a little bit more about you and put you on the spot a little bit. If that works with you, I got a couple lined up for you.
Sure.
All right, first one. I've got football on the brain because you worked in the NFL. Super Bowl was a few days ago. So I want to ask you this question: is if you were a quarterback in the league, right? You got two options. Would you rather win a Super Bowl, but you're the backup, you didn't get to play, or would you rather be the league MVP as a starter, but you don't get a ring? Those are your two choices. Which one are you going with?
Well, I think any player in the league and any person that works in an NFL organization, your ultimate goal is to get a ring. So I would get a ring.
I think I'm with you because then when I'm like, 50, 60, whatever, I could, that's always on my finger, right? I can always I can show people that and make up stories about how I won a game in the fourth quarter, something like that. But I think that's the ultimate goal. That's why you get into team sports to begin with. So I'm with you.
And, during the week, that backup puts in a lot of time as if he was the starter.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, it's hard work from Monday to Saturday. And a lot of people don't realize what all that entails. They just see the game on Sunday and think, oh, it's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of time and work that goes into preparation for Sunday.
It's also really hard to always be ready. That's a stressful situation, right? It's one thing when you're starting and you know what's coming. It's totally different where, an injury happens, you're thrown in the middle of a game and got to figure it out on the fly. That's a whole different time.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, you're one play away from being a starter.
Right. I'm with you. We're on the same page with that one, so I'll take it. Second question. All right. This is a kind of left field question, but let's say that, once you're retired, you're sent off to a deserted island. Okay, you got two options. You can either be there by yourself, it's just you, or you can be there with your worst enemy. And I'm not trying to imply that you have a lot of enemies, right? But you're either there on your own or you're there with someone that you can't stand. Which one are you going with?
I think I'd rather be by myself.
We're on the same page with both. I always say, like, I'll just Tom Hanks Castaway and make my own friends, right? Like I'll figure it out.
Exactly.
Oh, all right. Those are good answers, and I'm with you, man. Just something fun. We always like to wrap these stuff up with. I know we talked about a lot of serious things, but important things too. And I love the insight you kind of gave our listeners into the world of drug testing. It's one that I don't think gets talked about enough, but it's really crucial in this, in everything that goes into the whole anti-doping process. So thanks again, Mike, for hanging out with us and giving us that information, and most importantly, thanks for your support of not only our message, but this education that we both do across the country. Thanks for hanging out and keep up the good work.
Oh, thank you. I've really enjoyed it. And next time you're in Nashville, please come by. We'll give you a tour of the lab.
You got it, man. I'll put it on the calendar. Thanks again, Mike. Have a good one.
Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks for listening to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooton Foundation, a nonprofit organization leading a national campaign to enlighten people to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances and inspiring people to live and compete without the use of these substances. Please be sure to subscribe to our podcast and tune in to our next episode.